Hello friends, welcome back. It's time to talk about line art. I want to give you some tips on how I do mine, answer some of the questions I received through the years, and talk you through it while I work on a commission. If you're new here, hello, you can call me Halli and I'm an Italian artist. This is my cozy art channel where you can find tutorials, little studio vlogs, ASMR line art process, and all sorts of cozy art content. So if you enjoy, subscribe. You can also find me on Ko-fi if you wish to support me with a symbolic coffee or get my brushes. Now let's get into the video. If you've been following me on IG for a while, you probably know that I often post line art process videos like this one, and I always use a brush I made, which you can download for free, I'll leave it below, but I have a lot more to say about brushes, so let's start drawing. Alright you guys, here we are. So today I'm going to line art this commission here. I'm gonna show you my full process and I'll try to explain in the best way possible all my steps. So first things first, let's choose our brush. To start out, I want to talk a bit more about brushes because the brush you choose will of course determine how your line art will look, and it is important not only from an aesthetic standpoint but also from a comfort point of view. My priority is that my brush needs to be adapted to my hand and not the other way around, taking into consideration your hand pressure, your style, etc. Considering these parameters, me personally, I like my brush to be as balanced as possible, not too sensitive and not too stiff. I want it to perfectly follow my hand pressure, and you can achieve that by changing the brush parameters until you're satisfied, so keep that in mind. Some people use cheap-end style brushes that have a very sharp tapered end, but personally I don't want my brush to be tapered by default because that doesn't give me much control and I end up going Ctrl-Z 700 times. I want to taper the brush using my own hand pressure, but I'll show you later what I mean when we start drawing. So let's start line arting. Alrighty, so how do we start our line art? One thing I suggest you is to bring your sketch layer opacity down as much as you can, like this is perfect. Then create a new layer and this will be our line art layer. I like to do my line art in black, and then if I want to change the color, I'll do it later on when I'm finished coloring. I do a couple lines to choose how thick I want the brush to be. I think this is good enough. I'm gonna answer some of the questions I got on IG, and speaking of brushes, this one is how to achieve a dynamic line weight. And this is tricky because I feel like we all have a different opinion about it, and it is also a matter of taste, but generally speaking, I like my line art to be on the thinner side, and then I intensify the parts where I know there will be a shadow, so I kinda try to imagine how the colored artwork will look. As you can see, I like to start with more pressure, then slightly going softer and putting more pressure again at the end of the stroke, depending on how thick or tapered I want the line to end. I also like to intensify the points where two lines meet, just like this. And as you can tell from my sketch, I use these guidelines for the nose, like this little line right here, the little oval right here, and I like to include that into my line art because it's a stylistic thing that I like to show through. But of course, you follow your art style. And as you can see, I don't want to be extremely perfect. I wanted to have like a sketchy vibe. I had this thing where I used to do sketches, and once I was done with line art and colors, I was like, this looks nothing like the idea I had and the sketch I did before. And I realized that was one of the reasons. It was because my line art was too polished and too perfect, and that really didn't even cross my mind until I tried to be more free with my lines, or at least try to put less pressure on yourself. And I actually got a question about this topic on Instagram, how to incorporate your line art and make it look like it's part of the final piece without it feeling too disconnected. I have a little trick I use and I'll show it when we're done line arting at the end of the video, so stay tuned. So now that I'm drawing lashes, I can better show you what I mean by controlling your line weight and the tapering of your brush. I don't really like to do that flicking movement because it doesn't give me much control. I like to start kind of at the end of the lash and then I bring it back towards the lash line. I hope that makes sense, because in that way I can really control where the lash ends. This is honestly easier to show you than explaining it. So when you're at this stage, let's say you just finished the face as I did right here, you want to turn off the sketch layer and see if everything is turning how you want it to be. Okay, now with the hair, I like to use the same technique I use for the lashes, so controlling the lines as much as I can. See, I like to go to the very end of the stroke and going back. Yes, my main suggestion is don't overthink your lines. I feel like sometimes we forget that hair isn't supposed to be perfect unless you're drawing like very intricate hairstyle. Hair isn't supposed to be perfect at all, and we forget that hair falls wherever it wants to fall and it doesn't really follow a precise pattern. So especially in this case where the hair is slightly wavy, you can really go and follow your heart really. Maybe I tend to be more precise when I draw straight hair, because in that case I want to follow gravity, etc. So you want to take that into consideration. I'll give you an example. This is a sketch, right? It's kind of a polished sketch, and you can see how I am a little bit more precise because I want it to fall to go behind her shoulder here. So I knew that the gravity would pull it a little bit forward and then back. You know, if there was like a windy scene, you know, this strand wouldn't be as straight, but in this case it falls straight down. Another tip for consistent line weight is controlling your hand and arm. If you're experiencing hand cramps, chances are you are if you draw a lot. The trick is to stop drawing with your wrist but try to use your entire arm. This not only will avoid unnecessary pain, but it will also stabilize your strokes, giving you more control. See how I use my whole arm and the wrist barely moves? You will obviously move your wrist for details, of course, but the movements will be much smaller. Another thing I get asked a lot is, how are your lines so sharp and not pixelated? And guys, the answer is very simple, although this isn't really related to line art, but the answer is really simple. It's just that you need to use a bigger canvas. If your lines are too pixelated, chances are your canvas is just too small. This canvas here is 3000 pixels large, 400 dpi in case you want to print it. Another question I got is how to modulate your hand pressure. So truth is that hand pressure has a little bit of a learning curve. It is truly something that you develop by simply drawing regularly. Achieving those perfectly modulated lines can be hard if you're just starting, because you obviously need to familiarize with your tools, try many different brushes, and understanding what your hands need. I know this sounds funny, but we are all different. There isn't a one-size-fits-all, and this goes for art tools as well, both digital and traditional. If you really do not know where to start, I suggest you open a blank canvas and start testing that out yourself by drawing different shapes and lines, pressing with your hand and then releasing, pressing and releasing over and over again to understand the movement and build muscle memory. And then try with an artwork. And remember what I said before, don't overthink your lines too much. Do it first take, and if a line doesn't turn out perfect first try, go in and correct it. That will add some interest to your line work too. Now, I used to hate doing digital line art. It was my least favorite part of drawing because it was a constant Ctrl-C, really a struggle. Although I have to admit that getting an iPad and starting to draw on Procreate really changed my perspective. In general, working on a screen simplified the process. Now I really love it because once you find the perfect brush for you, customize it with the perfect settings, things really change because now you have a tool that is reliable and you're not uncertain anymore, pressing around to look for a different brush every time. Also, choosing what to incorporate from your sketch into the final line work is very important. Just have a replicate the little nose lines I showed you before. Now that we're done, there's one final thing that I want to show you, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and it is how to really incorporate your line art to the final piece. Now this is a step that I normally do at the end when I'm done coloring, but for the sake of this video, we'll do it now. First of all, I always like to recolor my line art, and to do this, simply tap on your line art layer and select Alpha Lock. Now whatever you do on this layer will only affect the line art. And let's go in to color it with a soft brush. A pick a rouge color for the skin, this of course depends on the skin tone of your character. Then a purple for the top and head. And then the hair. I am using the soft brush so I don't have harsh lines, and I want the colors to blend together and give some of the black parts to indicate the points of shadow. And now let's remove the Alpha Lock and duplicate the line art layer. Go to adjustments and add a tiny bit of Gaussian blur, around 3%. And then lower the opacity of this layer at about a half. This whole process will give depth to your line art and it will blend nicely with the colors, avoiding that disconnected effect. And there you have it. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and comment below what is your favorite part of the drawing process, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. I hope you have a lovely day and I'll see you on my next video. Bye!